Creature Campers, The Secret of Shadow Lake, Part 2 of 3. Chapter 4. Norm did not get a good night's sleep. When he put his head on the pillow, his feet stuck way out over the end of the bed. When he pulled his feet up, his head poked out over the end of the bed. By the time he found a comfortable way to curl up, the sun was rising, and Zena was at the door to their cabin. "Rise and shine, campers," she said. "Time for a good breakfast, and then basic canoe skills." Pardon me," asked Oliver. Did you say something about a lake monster?" From the dark circles under his eyes, he looked like he got as much sleep as Norm did. "Not to worry, that's just an old camp legend," said Zena. "Maybe." She turned and headed down towards the dining hall. "Follow me." After breakfast, Zena led them down to Shadow Lake, where Grumplestick stood waiting, clipboard in hand. Norm wondered what the other campers were up to. The dining hall had been filled with a wild collection of campers. There was a boy with bat wings, a fish girl, and even a pair of twins with horns and goat's legs. But, like Norm had expected, he towered over all of them. A low mist hung over Shadow Lake. 2 canoes sat along the shore, half in the water and half on the sandy beach. Norm scratched his head, wondering if the canoe would hold his weight. Hazel nervously thumped her foot. "I'm not going into that water," said Oliver. "Why not?" said Grumplestick. "Because there's a monster in that lake," said Wisp. "Ah, you mean the old creature of Shadow Lake," said Grumplestick. Norm, Oliver, Wisp, and Hazel all nodded. Grumplestick waved them off. "That's just an old camp legend, a tall tale." They all let out a sigh of relief. "Phew!" "Maybe," said Grumplestick. "Okay, on to canoeing. Norm and Oliver, you are partners. Wisp and Hazel, you're together. First step, life vests." Zena and Grumplestick helped the campers adjust the straps and tighten their vests. Oliver's was so big on his skinny body that he couldn't move his head left or right. Norm's was so small that it couldn't be fully strapped. Wisp had a vest small enough to fit a doll, with just enough room for his wings to stick out. Hazel's fit fine, but she kept buckling and unbuckling the clasps. "Second step," said Grumplestick. "Get seated in the canoe, one in front, one in the back." Norm and Oliver eyed up the canoe like it was an alligator. "I'll take the back," Norm said with a wheeze. His vest was way too tight. "Did you say something?" asked Oliver. He tried to turn to hear Norm better, but the vest was so puffy it covered his ears. Norm pointed at Oliver and then at the front of the canoe. Oliver gave Norm a big thumbs up and climbed into the front of the canoe. Norm put one foot into the canoe. The canoe sunk into the sand. He held the side and put his other foot in. The canoe sunk even lower. Norm had a bad feeling about this. "Balance is everything," said Grumplestick, marching along the beach with his clipboard and whistle. "Balance. Got it," said Norm. He carefully lined himself up with the middle of the back seat and sat down. The second he did, the front of the canoe shot up in the air and catapulted poor Oliver right out of it and into Shadow Lake with a splash. Oliver thrashed and flailed his arms in the water. "Help! Help! I can't swim! It's got me! The monster's got me!" "Oliver," said Grumplestick. "Yes." "Stand up," said Grumplestick. Oliver stopped thrashing and flailing and stood up. The water came up to his knees, and the only thing grabbing him was a piece of lakeweed wrapped around his ankle. "I knew that," said Oliver. His cheeks were very red. Grumplestick scribbled something on his clipboard. Chapter 5. After a few more tries, Norm and Oliver had the balance part down. Norm had to sit in the very middle of the canoe, between the seats, and Oliver, well, it didn't really matter where Oliver sat, so he took a seat in the front of the canoe. Better to see the lake creature that way, if it decided to show up. Hazel and Wisp had their own challenge, keeping Hazel in one seat. She was up and she was down. She was at the front of the canoe and she was at the back. "If you don't sit down and stay in your seat," said Wisp, "I'm going to splash your fur with lake water." Hazel gasped. "You wouldn't." "I would, if that's what it will take to keep you from tipping this canoe over." Hazel reluctantly took her seat. Meanwhile, Norm and Oliver sat as still as possible. Their canoe sat so low in the lake that any sudden movement might make it fill with water. "Okay, campers," said Grumplestick, "the next step is rowing in a straight line." He pointed to an orange cone floating away from the beach. "You'll have to work together, coordinating your oar strokes." "So that you can paddle to the cone, turn and come back to shore. Left, then right, then left, then right. Easy as that." Wisp and Hazel went first. Going in a straight line did not look as easy as Grumplestick made it sound. When Wisp paddled to the left, Hazel paddled 3 times on the right. When Wisp paddled 3 times on the left, Hazel paddled 6 times on the right. "We're going in circles," said Hazel. "Around and round and around in a circle. Why do you think that is, Wisp? Why do you think we're even going in circles? Do you know we're going in circles? A circle is not a straight line, Wisp, it's not." "I know what a circle is," cried Wisp. "You have to stop rowing so much each time." Hazel scratched his antlers and thumped her foot. Ha! Who knew? Grumplestick scrabbled on his clipboard even more. "Norm and Oliver, now it's your turn." Oliver turned to the side and gave Norm a thumbs up. Norm gave Oliver a thumbs up in return. Oliver dipped his paddle into the water and pushed, with 2 hands and all of his might. Norm dipped his paddle into the water and pushed, with 1 hand and just a little bit of his might. The canoe veered off to one side. "Switch sides," said Norm, trying to get them back on track. But Oliver couldn't hear him. His life vest covered most of his head. "Crisp fries? How would I know what they're serving for lunch, Norm? Right now we need to figure out how to paddle and get this over with before the lake monster shows up." No sooner had Oliver said lake monster than Norm saw something. Something in the water. "Oliver, look!" Norm said. He pointed his oar out toward the middle of the lake. Oliver also stopped paddling. "Is that the monster of Shadow Lake?" Norm finished. A single eye on top of a long, thin stalk had slowly risen above the surface of the water, and it was looking straight at them. Meanwhile, "I spy with my little eye a Bigfoot," said Barnaby Snoop. Barnaby pressed his eye against the periscope of his one-person submarine. "Once you're back out here in the middle of the lake tomorrow, I'll just motor under your canoe, reach up with my submarine's mechanical claw, and swoop you up in a net." He lowered the periscope and pedaled the submarine deeper. "A genius plan, Snoop," he said to himself. "A most genius plan indeed." Chapter 6. That night, Norm and Oliver told Wisp and Hazel all about what they had seen. "And then," Norm said, "it's one big eye poked out of the water, turned, and looked right at us." "As soon as we saw it, it dipped back below the water," said Oliver. "What are we going to do?" asked Wisp. "We'll tell someone," said Hazel. "That's what we'll do. We'll tell Zena and Grumplestick. We'll tell the other campers, and the army, and the navy, and—" "Hazel," said Norm. "Yes?" "Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Got it," she said. When the camp owl hooted 3 times, it was time for lights out. But none of them could fall asleep. Not when they knew that tomorrow they would have to face the monster of Shadow Lake. "Okay, campers," said Grumplestick. "Today's the day." Norm tried to keep his eyes open. Oliver snored while standing up. Hazel could hardly hold her antlers up, and Wisp's bloodshot eyes were hidden behind his mop of blue hair. None of them had slept a wink. Grumplestick blared his whistle to wake them all up. "I don't know what's gotten into you four, but if you think you can pass this canoe test in your sleep, you have another thing coming. Now, put on your vests." Norm, Oliver, Hazel, and Wisp hustled for their vests, while Grumplestick nodded and grumbled and scribbled things on his clipboard. Norm wondered if Grumplestick was playing tic-tac-toe against himself. "In order to pass your canoe skills test, you will have to paddle out to Mystery Island in the middle of the lake and collect a flag to rescue Xena." "Wait," said Norm. "Our counsellor is out on an island in the middle of the lake?" "Yes," said Grumplestick. "She is stranded there. But she has s'mores. And you'll have s'mores too when you rescue her." "Hello!" Xena called, waving from the tiny island in the middle of the lake. "Can someone please get me off this island?" "As you can see," said Grumplestick, "she needs your help. Or at least sticks for making some s'mores. Can't make s'mores without a good s'mores stick." Oliver raised his hand. "But, Mr. Grumplestick, sir, there's a—" "S'mores," said Grumplestick. "In the lake," said Norm. "We saw—" "S'mores," Grumplestick said. Wisp said, "But s'mores!" Hazel thumped her foot. "Wait, I know this one," said Norm. "S'mores." Said Grumplestick, scribbling an X on his clipboard. "Ha! I won. Okay, glad we had that talk. Now, let's get paddling." Meanwhile, a lone periscope poked above the surface of the water. It swiveled toward Mystery Island. It swiveled back to shore, and then, ever so slowly, it dipped back below the surface of the water. "Patience, Barnaby," he said. "A trap sprung in haste is a trap gone to waste." Barnaby Snoop knew that it was only a matter of time. He was going to get what he wanted. Barnaby Snoop always got what he wanted. And what he wanted, more than anything, was Bigfoot. Not just any Bigfoot. He wanted this Bigfoot. He wanted Norm.